Yes, we're back again talking about my most used plugins of 2024. I have 5 plugins for you that have made their way into my regular use on production, sound design, mixing, and mastering. Let's get right into it.
Hey, Drew, let's go.
The first plugin I'm going to talk about, I've been using for a while, but it hasn't really made its way into regular use until this year when I started making a lot more regular lo-fi music and doing a little bit more side chaining with my mixes. And as I've wanted to do more side chaining across different DAWs, because I use both Ableton and Pro Tools, I wanted to have a pretty consistent way of doing side chaining between the two. So I have started using Kickstart 2 by Cable Guys and Nicky Romero. It is a sidechain plugin, essentially, and incredibly inexpensive at $16. Does an auto sidechain sound if you're looking for that really like house pumpy EDM kind of sound, but also a really easy setup if you're trying to sidechain to a kick with easy to manipulate envelopes. You can sidechain to your kick and have that be the threshold marker, but then also have different variations of how the sound dips and then reintroduces itself back into the feed. Very, very useful, especially with doing more interesting creative work, some sound design work, doing interesting ducking in like lo-fi or EDM. It's super useful, especially with the band split capabilities it has right under the mix knob. It can allow you to only affect certain aspects of the mix, which is super cool. So you could have it not affect the top end or bottom end respectively and only affect the opposite, which is super useful if you just want it to only affect maybe like the sub frequencies of a bass guitar. You wanted a kick to affect only the sub frequencies, but you didn't necessarily want it to affect like your upper mid range harmonic frequencies, where you maybe want just the kick drum and the bass guitar to meld a little bit better together, talk a little bit better together. You can use this to do some of that like massaging of the low end into the mix and have them speak a little bit easier to each other. And the biggest part for me was being able to be used across multiple DAWs, not having a dedicated side chain function or a preset that I use only in Ableton or only in Pro Tools, but the fact that I can use the same structure of plugin across both of the things that I use was really beneficial to me. The second plugin I want to talk about is Gojira X by Neural DSP. Neural DSP makes some of the best guitar amp simulators on the market, in my opinion. I love the way they sound. Big fan of some of the other ones as well, namely the Morgan Amp Suite, the Nameless Suite, Polyphia Tim Henson Suite, the Corey Wong. But I've been really loving the Gojira X plugin specifically, mainly because of its flexibility in use. It can be both great for heavy music, which I mix and produce a lot of the time, but also for cleaner sounds. It's got some really interesting effects and things you can do with octaves. Incredibly great clean tones on this amplifier and heavy tones that I've been really happy with, so much so that I've actually used and printed the tones that we've gotten from that instead of reamping them through something maybe like a real amp or like an Axe Effects or something like that. Instead of doing those, I'm just printing the amp sim sound as the guitar tone for the record. I think like 3 or 4 different records have that amp sound printed on it this year, and I think those mixes sound amazing. The thing that really sets this one specifically apart, though, for me is the whammy pedal function. I was working with a band called Heirloom recently. We were writing for some of their new record, and being able to use that whammy function to test out different pitch shifting things or dropping an octave and using it as, you know, a layer and doubling guitars has been really cool. There's so many cool things, and it takes guitars so well without making them sound super artifacty, and doing the weird stretching thing that a lot of pitch shifters can do sometimes. So if you do heavy music and pop music or somewhere in between and you're looking for something really flexible, I would highly recommend the Gojira X or really anything from Neural DSP. For the third plugin, I actually have to give a shout out to Brad Phillips from Studio 101 for turning me onto this one. And it's the Ulean Loudness Meter 2. It is a LUFS metering plugin. I found that sometimes when I would use plugins to meter off of, they would either add some sort of weird tonality to it or add some sort of limiting to it for some reason. I don't understand why. And I don't need that from a metering plugin. I just need to be able to see really good references of where I am, and matching loudnesses, especially on things like EPs and longer records. I want to make sure that I'm matching like general volume level on my mixes. The best thing about this is if this is something that you're interested in and looking for as a mix engineer or as a producer, there's a free version of this plugin. I'll leave a link in the description to go pick that up if that's something you're interested in. Not affiliate, just go grab it. It's super helpful for me. It has been, at least. It's made its way to every single one of my mixes just from a monitoring and keeping my target range loudness in check. Another weirdly specific thing that this has been really nice for, I've been using the Slate VSX headphones a lot lately, and I'm going to make a totally separate video about these headphones and my journey the last like 6 months to a year with these. But when you use the VSX plugin, it actually reduces the output volume on your master, which can be a little weird when trying to know if you're hitting your target volume or not. So I actually use the Ulean Loudness Meter before the VSX plugin so that as I'm mixing, I can see if I'm hitting the target range. I can make sure I'm in the right area of target range of loudness that's coming off my master bus. So like I said, if you want to pick that up, there's a free version. I have the paid version and it's super worth the money, but the link will be in the description for that if you want to grab that. The next plugin is something I think every single one of you should pick up, and that is a clipper, specifically standard clip from Sir Audio Tools. With the way modern production is kind of going, clipping has become an absolute necessity in production and mixing. It's been really interesting to see how people have pushed the boundaries of using clipping, even using clipping instead of compression, and opting for the clarity of clipping rather than some of the tonality and smushiness of compression has been super popular. Even talking to some friends of mine, like my friend Scott, he mixes bands like Woe Is Me and a bunch of really heavy bands, and he tends to opt to clip especially drums and vocals like kind of across the board on the individual channels, as well as like the drum bus and the master bus. Like he's using clipping a lot. And I'm also seeing that a lot more in hip hop music. Like clipping 808s is super normal. Clipping snares is super normal. So if you're looking for a really great transparent clipper plugin, I would highly recommend the Sir Audio Tools standard clip. In the last year, I've used it all across my mix and productions, almost on every other channel that I can think of in some way, especially if I'm trying to get like a really cool pushed sound, like that sound that feels like everything is both in your face but not too loud at the same time, has been really cool. It's really popular in heavier genres or like hip hop genres of things feeling incredibly close, but also really well balanced. And like I said, I've been using it on individual channels. I've been using it on the drum bus, and I've been using it on my master bus as like a finalizer post the maximizer on my master chain if I really just need that extra little bit of something. The other really great thing about the standard clip plugin that I love is there's a little fader in the middle. It's like a slider, and it allows you to blend in soft clipping into your clipper. So like soft clip saturation on top of the hard clipping that you're doing. So you can like use that to blend in some extra saturation, especially on vocals. This is super cool. You can use this to compress your vocals in a way, but then use the soft clip saturation to blend in a little bit of like sizzle and cleanup on the top end as well. So it adds a really cool character, again, on things like drums. It can be super cool on snares to bring out different characteristics. And you can kind of use that slider as needed, kind of move it across and see what it does as you're adding things, mess with it and see what cool characteristics it can bring out of different sounds. And at the incredible price of only $25 at the time of recording, it is an incredible cost for such an incredibly useful plugin that has, like I said, been on basically everything I've mixed this year. The final plugin is one that I was a little skeptical about at first. It took my friend Josh from my podcast Home Studio Hangout and our good friend and his production partner Lee Rouse, great producer and mix engineer, talking me into this plugin, and it is the T-Rack Sunset Sounds Reverb. This reverb has changed my life when it comes to mixing a lot of different aspects, but primarily drums and room simulation. So if you're trying to do a thing like put somebody in a room, or maybe you get drum tracks to mix and you don't necessarily have a really great room mic, this is an incredible plugin. It's a fix-all plugin for that, in my opinion. I've used it for that in so many ways to create rooms of drums that just didn't have it. And honestly, where it's been really cool this year is I've done a ton of live record mixing. So I mixed a record this year that was a 12-song worship record that was fully live. And I've done a lot of post-mixing for churches where they send me their stems and I take their stems and I turn it into a better version of their Sunday live mix that they can then repurpose for their YouTube channels and whatnot. Praise of 1,000 generations, you are worthy, Lord of all. But because of that, I've been doing a ton of live mixing, and this reverb has been really awesome for creating a tighter drum room than the room mics offer. But then also, because a couple of the churches that I work at don't always send me the best room mics, I can pick the room mics that I do like and then use the T-Rack Sunset Sound Reverb as almost a live send where like everything gets bussed to this all room reverb, and it kind of makes the whole mix feel like it's in the same room together. So it's almost faking like an entire room mic, a live room mic. It's been super cool for that stuff. But even just as like a room reverb for drums or a room reverb for vocals, or you want your guitars to feel like it's in more of like a studio room environment, capturing that live element of it. It's been such an incredible simulation, probably the best room reverb simulation that I found so far. And I would love to hear if you have any other recommendations of these kinds of plugins, like drop them in the comments, because them turning me onto this plugin has been incredibly worth it. And I'm super willing to like dive more into other plugins that might also be willing to do a similar thing. But this Sunset Sound Reverb specifically has been a game changer for me in terms of room simulation. And like I said, the live aspect has been super, super useful. So those are the plugins that have made its way into my regular use this year. After I looked back on a bunch of my sessions, these are the ones that I saw popping up the most. Super pumped on how my mixes have been and productions have been coming out this year. Shout out to all the artists that I've worked with this year that have worked with me, and it's been a super great year of mixing and production. If you like any of these, or if you have experience with any of these, drop those in the comments. Or if there's a plugin you think I need to check out next year that, you know, might be a game changer for you, drop that junk in the comments, because I want to check it out and I want to see if it'll make it into my list in next year for 2025. And if you want to see the plugins that made it to this list last year in 2023, I'm going to leave that video right over here to check it out. I think you're going to enjoy the recommendations I have in that one as well. So I'll see you in that video. Peace.